Okay, for today's um, image adjustments, we're going to go through quite a few different ones. So feel free to stop or pause the video at any time and restart. You guys know how to do this. All right, so I'm going to open up some images that I feel like have dramatic lighting. Remember, it doesn't really matter what you photograph. You're just really thinking about the quality of the light and the shadows and those kinds of things. So I'm going to open up these uh, several images and we'll take a look. And we'll try to make them look as good as possible. Okay, so this one is a more subtle kind of image to think about the shadows, but I thought, there's some nice textures and colors here. So let's start this off. Now the first thing I want to do is make a copy of my background. And so again, I'm clicking and dragging on the layer to make a new layer. And you can tell which layer is highlighted or active because it changes value. Okay. Now I'm going to skip over brightness contrast because honestly I don't use that one very much, but I use levels all the time. So again, remember this is a histogram showing us our range from black to mid-gray to white values. So I don't have that many blacks. I'm just going to move it over a little bit. And you see how intense the grass kind of gets. This wall is actually a little off-white, so I don't want to move the white too far in because it'll just blow out. But I can move it to right when it starts to spike up. And that adds a little depth to the way the light is hitting the shadow. So I like that. Okay, the next adjustment, which is a new one we haven't talked about, which is curves. And it looks like a graph with like a line through it. And this controls our contrast. Okay, so if you can click on this diagonal line as much as you want, and then you click and kind of manipulate the line. Okay, you can go up or down. So if you go up on this corner and then maybe a little bit down in the middle and then a little more up, just kind of play with it. But you guys see how that's a very slight kind of S shape? That's going to add contrast to your image. Again, let's see what it looked like before and after, before and after. And we might have a little bit too much up here. So if I can grab it and bring it down a little bit. And now it's kind of just affecting in there, which I think looks better, looks a little richer. I think one of the things that we get scared of is going too dark, but if you have darkness in your image, it really adds kind of a depth to it. So don't be afraid of that. So if you move this line, this diagonal line, in kind of a very subtle S shape, you will add contrast. If you do it kind of like a backwards S, that's going to flatten out your image. And typically here in this region, we have very soft light, so there you don't have to usually knock down the contrast. Usually you're boosting it a little bit. But I used to live in Colorado, and when I would photograph during the snow, because it snowed, I don't know, a lot, but the sun came out a lot as well. And then you would just have this real high contrast light, and so you'd have to bring it down. But in this region, we don't have to do that so much. Usually we're just boosting the contrast ever so slightly. Okay, the next thing is an exposure control. This is very similar to the brightness contrast. I don't use this a whole lot. Sometimes I do. You do have some presets where you can underexpose by 1 stop or 2 stops, overexpose by one stop or 2 stops. But then if you just leave that in custom and you move your toggles, you can see how you can adjust again, the brightness contrast. And here's, well, I guess I set it back to 0, but I don't use this a whole lot, but that's what it does. You can play around with it. I'm going to go ahead and I want to show you how you can delete a layer. So I have this layer highlighted, and this down here is our trash can. So what I'm going to do is drag it to the trash can and then let go, and it deletes that layer. I really don't need it. Now the hue saturation is something you may want to play around with. This is kind of fun. You can change the colors of your image just by moving this toggle up and down and do some real graphic kind of stuff. You know, I don't think it's necessarily appropriate for this assignment, but you can always have fun. Then there's saturation, and you can turn a color image to black and white just by moving this saturation toggle all the way to the left. Okay, and that took out all the color. And if I move that toggle all the way to the right, it super saturates. Again, it looks, you know, really kind of crazy. But if you want just a little, let's see what it looked like before. If we want to just soup up the colors just a little bit, you know, something like that, it doesn't do kind of any harm. And then if you like the look of kind of like the 70s kind of photograph where things are faded, then you can start to desaturate. You just don't want to go too far. But that seems to be kind of a trend right now, is desaturated image. And again, lightness, darkness, you know, how bright or dark your image is. Again, I don't use that a whole lot. Okay, so I'm going to increase this just a few. All right, so now we've got levels, curves, hue, saturation. I've gone over exposure. I skipped vibrance. Oh, okay, so let's play with this. Again, we have the saturation. The vibrance is kind of fun to play with, though. You know, it's kind of like a saturation, but just how much color is in, you know, how much lightness and color is in each different color. And so some people like to boost the vibrance a little bit. Okay. Again, sometimes you could be doing too much. Like, again, let's look at what we had before. I'm going to turn all of these off just to see. Our before image. Then we added levels. Then we added contrast a little bit. I can't really tell the hue saturation. I didn't do anything super dramatic. And same with the vibrance. Kind of don't see anything really happening there. Now if I want to go in and adjust it again, do you remember you just kind of double click inside on the icon and it brings you right back where you were. Let's see. I added some more there. Like, it's so subtle, but you can kind of see it in the sky, and I'm looking right in here. So the blues are getting a little bit bluer when I do that. You know, it's kind of your personal taste. I think as long as it still looks like a photograph, you can play around with it as much as possible. Okay, so we did hue saturation, and then we can do color balance. Now, I should have said in hue saturation there are drop-down boxes, and you can pick out certain colors you want to play with, you know, and different options. So please, as you're going through these options, click on every single drop-down menu you're offered. It won't hurt anything. If we don't save this, it's no skin off our nose. It's not going to replace our original file. But here you can, if you have like, see how blue this is right here? I can remove some of that blue by adding some yellow, but then it makes it really too green. So that's not the key. Or I have to do it very subtly. And maybe it's got too much cyan in there. And so I can add some red. That kind of looks better. That shadow now looks a little bit more gray than blue. So let's just look before, see how blue it is. And then after, the whole image looks a little bit warmer. And I'll be honest with you, this was early in the morning, so the shadows are really long, elongated. Okay, so I've kind of played with that image. Let's try a different one. Now this image I took in London in Chinatown. My first thing is I don't like this section here. And I do like this guy and his long shadow. So I'm going to crop it so that this is not as dominant as it is right now. So I'm in ratio. So it gives me a little bit of freedom, and I'm going to crop that. What do you guys think? Maybe I should crop it a little bit from that side too. Get a long and skinny image. There, that doesn't distract me quite as much. I wonder if I can come over even more. There we go. And then it's really the light kind of illuminating these lanterns, but during the day. And so I really liked the look of that. So again, I'll make a copy of my background. This one I don't think I need to do any color adjustments to, but I'm going to play with the curves. Okay, so it's already kind of a high contrast image, but let's see what we can do here. And I'm gonna go let the things in silhouette. I mean, you really can't see anybody's face, and so by letting it go dark like this, it's really kind of perfect. You have to decide if you want this detail in some of these places, and if you don't, you can go darker. Okay, so you have that choice. Let's see what else. Let's go through. So we did color balance. On this one, I really like the red, and I don't want to desaturate it. I think we're good. The next one to that is black and white, and let's just see. As soon as I click it, it turns to black and white. I think you lose those lanterns though. Now you can play with all these colors and make adjustments. And there, if I move the red toggle, see how now those lanterns really pop out. But I just think the color red against that blue sky was something really kind of cool. So, you know, one of the biggest mistakes people do when they switch their images to black and white is they just leave it. They leave them as they were. And, oh, that's not bad. Darkening the sky. It helps them stand out. But again, without that, look how the red just pops. And here, it's not bad. So I could keep playing with these adjustments and make it work. So there, we have shown you now two different ways to turn an image to black and white. One was in the hue saturation, moving the toggle all the way to the left. The second is to actually click the black and white box, and then you have some wiggle room. Okay, here I am with a new image. This one's slightly more abstract and very, very simple. I think I would crop a little bit more off the top, but I do like these diagonal lines I'm using. And okay, so this one's kind of interesting. I think I'll use a little bit of the levels. I won't get any more detail in my highlights through this because I can't really stretch those out. What I've got to do is come over here and use this what's called the burn tool, and it's underneath the dodge tool, which is the first default one. The burn tool, this is a name that comes out of the darkroom, and it will make your image darker. It's like concentrating the light in a specific area to make it darker. Now, since I've done a levels 1, I need to make sure that I have my background copy selected, because this is going to not, I don't want it to affect the levels layer. I want it to affect the background copy, the actual image. Okay, so that's very important. Whatever you want to apply to, you know, the image, and not a preset adjustment or the adjustment, you have to be on the background layer. Okay, so I'm going to kind of start from outside, and you click and drag. Okay, now the brush you get from over here, when you click on any of these tools that do act like brushes, you have these options up here. Okay, the brush style, we can change all the different, I was in general, but there's dry media brushes, there are wet media brushes, special effects brushes. You can select from all these different options. I went with a soft round pressure opacity. And then as far as my range, this is a highlight, so it's going to affect the highlight. And I kept the exposure pretty low because this you can see pretty quickly. So I'm going to start from out here and then move into the image. And I can't do this at a straight line, but you guys see how it's getting darker. Oops, my mouse is not working. Whoops. Now I think it's actually getting kind of gray looking, too dark. So I'm going to step back. Now, do you guys remember I have my history here? So you can do edit, undo, burn tool, or see how many times I burned here? I can step back and kind of undo what I did. I don't see anything there. All right, let's try to do this again. Make sure I'm on the background. Maybe I need to, I'm going to lower the exposure even more. 18%. And my using not a flat surface exactly, but all right, so that's just getting it a little bit darker, giving a little bit more information. And some, oh, I think that went too dark, so I'm going to step back. All right, so that just gives me a little bit more information there. Now watch the grass if I do this. You see how you can make the grass a little bit more intense? Just greener, a little darker, a little richer. That kind of helps balance out the shadow there. All right, so I'm liking the way this looks, and I'm going to save it. Move on to the next image. Let's see what we've got to do here. This is an image I took while my students are waiting to get into my class, and I like the way that they're in silhouette. Let's see if we can even bump up this contrast. Again, make a copy. I can see if I can blow out some of those highlights a little bit more. I mean, I don't really care to see their faces, but that's a nice kind of dramatic look. This door is a little bit crooked over here, so I might, well, let's see if we can straighten it. Draw an edge to it. That side's straight, now this side's crooked. You know, gotta pick your battles here. Okay, that looks pretty good. Nice, harsh, high. This is my neighborhood, kind of at night. I'm going to pull down on this. There's a fire truck. I really like this person walking out. And this, to me, this is very dramatic light, right? So you just have to kind of photograph what you see around you. Now this is the same window from here on the second floor of the WA building, and it was really foggy one morning, and I went and looked and just photographed out that window. So let's just see. Let's see what we can do with this. And again, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to increase the contrast, make the light and shadows kind of more dramatic. Let me just see what the levels are. So yeah, I can move my darks in. I can move my lights. It kind of washes it out a little bit. Let's try curves. And part of me really likes the ray of light that's coming through. So I definitely, if I go up too high, I'm going to lose that, right? And so there's something really kind of nice about keeping it a little bit on the dark side. Maybe that's too much. Let's see what it looks like. Yeah, I think that's okay. Yeah, I like that. So you can see, using various tones, um, various adjustments rather, that you can really kind of play with your image. Now, of course, when you're done editing, make sure your crop is good, resize, rename, and then you'll be ready to upload.